Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Coach, the Professional Coaching Podcast with me, your host, Teresa Brooks. And I'm really excited. I always sound really excited because I am really excited to introduce a fabulous guest today. And I'm sure you will find this of deep interest, really. And we had a Zoom call the other week and we covered so many topics. So we're going to try and narrow it down, but I would love to introduce to you Dr. Anne Whitehouse, who is author of Pull Back Your Power, and she's a success healer for professional women. So welcome to the show, Anne. It's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
And, you know, we were just talking, weren't we, just off air about, wow, you know, where to kind of start, because your work is all about feminine confidence. And so, of course, already we've set a huge landscape there for discussion.
We have.
And what I thought might be a really nice inroad is just for you to share with us. There's a wonderful header on your website and it says Cambridge scientist to power alchemist, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so I just wondered if you might share with us a little bit about your story and how a Cambridge scientist set for that kind of science-led career ends up as a female power alchemist.
Well, I will try to cut it down. So basically I was what you would call academic high flyer. I went to Cambridge, first degree, PhD, postdoctoral research fellowship. I was set to be an academic. And up to that point, you know, I'd had lots of supportive people in my environment, and I believed that I could do anything that I was capable of doing. Then I got my first lectureship, which was in an engineering department, not Cambridge. And it was astonishing because it was like when I walked through the door, it was as if the rug had been just pulled out from under me. I could do the actual job just fine. You know, I brought in the research funding. I had great reports from my students. I was getting all the publications into the journals, all the stuff that you have to do as an academic. I could do it just fine. But my confidence just evaporated and my stress went off the scale. And this basically deteriorated. And over 6 short years, I went from, you know, this high-flying academic to completely burnt out. I had chronic fatigue syndrome, and I lost my scientific career that I'd spent so many years working for. And it was a mystery, really, why I had reacted with such extreme stress in a job that I could do absolutely fine. There was something going on under the surface. And at the time, I only wanted to get my health back, get my life back, because conventional medicine could do nothing for me. So that took me into the world of, well, why had I reacted that way? What was it that was going on that made me feel lacking, you know, confidence? What caused my anxiety? Why did I feel, well, we didn't use the words imposter syndrome back then because no one had, I don't think it had been really coined, but looking back, totally imposter syndrome.
What happened, Anne, when you, because I can just imagine this sort of like, you know, young, vibrant, academic, smart woman that you are, and kind of, you said that when you entered the space, you felt like the rug had been pulled from under your feet. What do you mean by that? What happened?
Well, it was the way it felt to be there. So it was engineering. It was a very male-dominated environment. And there was me, a young woman. I was just 27 at the time. And it was the effect of how it felt to be in there, being such a minority, with the underlying attitudes, the undercurrent. There was obviously some unpleasant stuff that went on. That's, alas, inevitable for a young woman in that kind of environment. But it was like a sort of a drip, drip, drip. I just got undermined subtly, day after day after day. I didn't even realize it at the time. I didn't understand why I suddenly found I couldn't speak up in meetings, and why I wasn't confidently putting myself forward when I had been fine before I'd gone into that environment. So basically that took me into analysing what was going on in my mind, and that took me into working with the subconscious, because on the surface it really wasn't obvious what had happened. So that took me into this of the limiting beliefs, and what I actually discovered was much, much bigger than that. And that was what I see as literally a hidden subconscious operating system. So basically on the surface we have our, you know, our 21st century beliefs. At the time it was the 20th, but we have our beliefs about our rights, our entitlement, our abilities, our equality. But underneath, what we've got is a whole operating system which is still deeply rooted in the patriarchal past, which means that any woman who goes into any kind of career that's basically beyond the home is going to be getting lots of subtle messages from both from other people and from the institutions and from our own subconscious mind. That's important to emphasize, telling us you're not allowed to be here. It's forbidden for you to be here. You'll be punished for being here. You're not allowed to be a powerful woman in this environment. And you don't know it's there, but it's in fact undermining you. Your own subconscious is saying you're in danger here, you're in danger, day after day after day. And of course, the higher up the ladder you go, the worse it gets.
Yeah. And do you find that was what that sounds like? That's of course what was subtly and incrementally like wearing you away and silencing you. That's what I'm hearing. That was silencing you. And did you, I guess you had like all guns blazing and the gusto and the enthusiasm at first. Can you remember any specific times or moments where things were said that landed in that way that, you know, some females listening might resonate with, where you're like, oh, it just kind of almost kind of physically take you back?
There were so many.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, but yeah.
Well, this is what every time I speak to professional women or they read my book, they say, yes, that's happened to me. Yes, that's happened to me. I thought it was just me. I often hear that. It's things like you're in a group and you'll be asked to make the tea, even though you might be, as one time it happened to me, I was the what actually I describe as the most humiliating experience of my life, when I was at an engineering company presenting some ideas for research that they had asked me for. I was there as the invited expert, and then halfway through my presentation they started talking over me, and I was just invisible. They disregarded me. They were talking to my technician, a man, and I actually stood there and I was so crushed and humiliated by this complete disregard of me and my qualifications and my experience and my all of that I couldn't open my mouth. I couldn't say what I wanted to say, which was, excuse me, do you mind? I just, it's as if I'd been,
silent.
Totally. And I actually stood there for a whole, at least an hour. I think it was over an hour. I stood there at the overhead projector, and eventually I just sat down. But even today, it makes me feel physically ill. And I've heard from so many women things like they'll be asked to make the tea, they'll be asked to take the minutes. Just, the woman is in the subservient position. She has to do the support. Or, you'll find you're putting forward an idea and you're completely ignored. And then a man will put the same idea forward 10 minutes later. And, oh yes, they take, he's acknowledged for the idea. And that,
so it's the response, isn't it, that you're receiving, and that being minimized is what it sounds like. And standing there must have been incredibly humiliating for you, because what is like, why are you talking to the technician? Why don't you talk to me? I'm the presenter. And it's like everything's starting to happen around you, and you're like, hello, I am here. Exactly. And that feeling must have just been so destroying. And of course, I'm sure, like you say, you've got lots and lots of other examples of that. Do you think that the people that did that, said that, behaved that way, how aware do you think they actually were about that?
Well, this is the thing, and this is what I think is so important that I've flagged up in all my research over the last 20 years. It's that this is from a knee-jerk reaction. It's not somebody thinking, oh, I'm going to put that woman down. It's because in the operating system, if you say to somebody, okay, imagine, what does a university professor look like? What does a surgeon look like? What does a managing director look like? Your subconscious will give you the picture of a man every single time. And then you can make a conscious adjustment. Oh, it might be a woman, but that knee-jerk thing puts the man in the authority position. Similarly, if you say to somebody, what does a receptionist look like? What does a cleaner look like? What does somebody who serves the tea look like? You're going to get shown a woman. So
because that's what we've learned, isn't it? That's what we've learned. It's our program. It's all been put into us, like you say.
And I say, it's important to emphasize, I absolutely had an equal opportunities upbringing. My parents were fantastic. I had every encouragement, every opportunity, and the same from my school to go forward and get out there into a man's career in inverted commas and succeed. And it took me by surprise. I wasn't expecting it. It wasn't in my conscious programming, but it was all under the surface. And things like I would answer the phone and somebody would say, "Oh, can I speak to Dr. Whitehouse?" And I'd say, "Yes, speaking." And they go, "Oh, really?" As if they thought I was the secretary because I was female. And
it's interesting, isn't it, that people will actually, I was just thinking that as you were talking, people will actually respond verbally to that. Oh, I'm surprised. I wasn't expecting, and they actually verbalize it. They don't even manage to contain it within. And so what I think what I'm hearing is the answer to the question is that it's very low. The awareness is very low.
Very low, very low. This is the thing. So basically the programming of the people in that meeting is a beautiful example. It was such that it seemed completely normal and acceptable to ignore me, even though they'd actually invited me as the expert, right? It didn't
the irony,
as inappropriate or rude, because all of their programming had me on the sidelines. And this is the thing, it's not about pointing fingers at individuals and saying you are sexist. Not at all. We are still running this hidden operating system universally. It's everywhere. And we need to free ourselves from that in order to free ourselves from this so-called unconscious bias. It's not unconscious because I've analysed exactly what's going on, exactly what the beliefs are and how it is undermining us. So the whole thing is, oh goodness, if we have got this whole operating system against us, it's no wonder we then feel not confident, or we feel like an imposter because we're not ticking the right boxes. If we go into a situation where all the subtle boxes are saying you've got to be male, we do not tick those boxes, we never can. So our subconscious is going to say, well, goodness, you don't fit in here, Anne.
It's a no from us.
You're not good enough. You are an imposter. And we don't realize why we're getting the signals. We just get the signals of you're not good enough. So that's what then becomes the imposter syndrome, and becomes the gender confidence gap, the gender authority gap. And although obviously I experienced this in the world of engineering, it's what I've discovered working with so many women is that we see the same thing everywhere. So whether you are in law or medicine or politics, or whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you are a coach going out online into a very visible space, you're going to get the same things happening because we're all sharing the same programming.
Which suggests very strongly that we all need to relearn the programming. And of course,
absolutely,
the female empowerment work is a lot about this, understanding our own programming, of course, and then making adjustments and going again. And really what we hear in this language of, rising up, that really is the empowerment. But I think it's really important, and I'd love to know what you think. How important is it for, of course, the men to understand this as well? And how willing are they to become involved in these learnings?
Oh, that's a big question. Firstly, it is essential, right? It is essential. So, as you say, the awareness of understanding that your subconscious is in fact against you. So, there are a lot of really enlightened men, or men who are really wanting to have equality, whether they are employers or whether it's with their peers. They want that consciously. But then understanding that subconsciously all of those old beliefs are still there, and that it's like that, it will come out. So unless you're super aware, it is going to undermine you. So there's a lot that men can do to understand this, what I call the power dynamic, and that's what I teach women how to change. And slightly shifting the subjects, the thing is that a lot of women's empowerment is telling you to do what I call really surface-based things. This lean in, or feel the fear and do it anyway, push yourself out of your comfort zone. And here's the problem with that is that if you are doing that, you are pushing yourself into the place where your subconscious says you're in danger. And this is why it affected me so dramatically,
because that is still like a really masculine energy, isn't it? It's like, well, feel the fear and do it anyway. So it's like power through and don't worry about how you feel, just go for it. And that doesn't work.
It doesn't work. I mean, it might work in an emergency situation for one event, right?
Yes.
And that's absolutely, if you've got to do something, you can push yourself to do it. But if you're doing that every single day for years, like I did, The way I describe it is to think about an elastic band. So your subconscious says like, here, this is what is safe. My programming says this is what a woman has to be. That's how she is, allowed to behave. She's not allowed to be like this. She's not allowed to do that. She's certainly not allowed to have authority over these men. That's in the subconscious operating system. We don't know it's there. It's in there. Then we start to do something different. We start to, embrace our power. We decide, I want that high-powered career. I want to have that business. I want to have, that many clients. I want to be doing the Facebook Lives and talking to the media and all of this stuff. And so what happens is we are taking ourselves away from this benchmark. So we're pulling away like this. So if you can imagine what's going to happen to the elastic band, it gets stretched and stretched and stretched and stretched. And at some point, your subconscious will get more and more freaked out and it'll try and pull you back more and more. And so that's when the anxiety comes up worse, the imposter syndrome comes up worse, because your subconscious is saying, you're going to die for this. You're going to be put to death, because powerful women in the past have been persecuted and put to death. And that's what I'm feeling here. I'm such a minority, getting all these signals that I shouldn't be here. So, that elastic stretching and something is going to break. So it could be, in my case, it was my health. After all the stress and the anxiety and the insomnia and all the works, it might be relationships, it might go into your mental health, but something is going to break. And when you are pushing yourself in that way, fighting that subconscious operating system, what you're going to get is the sabotage and blocks and obstacles and all the well-being stuff. It's all going to go because you're not aligned with yourself, because while we're trying to fit into that male default benchmark, which is everywhere in the world, while we're getting all the messages saying, if you want to succeed, you've got to be like this, you've got to tick these boxes, you've got to behave in a certain way, you've got to do this, that, and the other. We are not having the freedom to align with ourselves. We need to free up this subconscious programming to release that inner conflict, to release that strain, that inner strain. And then, only then are we free to say, well, actually, I can be myself and be powerful and have this career. But we can't just say, I'm going to do it until we've released the subconscious, because that inner strain will be there and it will undermine us.
And that's a huge piece of work, isn't it? Because
it's
basically a rebuild.
It is.
And,
it is.
Going inside and going to the patterns and going to subconscious to inquire within and find out what's actually going on here, and then to find the solutions. And then, of course, to implement and actually do things differently and show up differently. And so, it's not an overnight thing, is it? And how did you do it, Anne? What did you actually discover in obviously you discovered a lot in your subconscious, but what did you do to change the patterns that helped you to align with yourself?
So here's the interesting thing. I had done a lot of belief work, belief changing, and I know there are many modalities that allow you to do that in various ways. And they all have a lot of merit. And I've done a lot of work on this. So at this time, I don't know how far I was, maybe 5 or 6 years after I'd left my lectureship. And by this time I was, I had my own business in the healing and women's empowerment. But there was something missing, because even though I'd done so much work on myself and I felt very different when I went into a situation that I would call an Achilles heel situation. For example, an interview or a conversation which you think is going to be a bit confrontational, I would still get all of the anxiety and the feelings, my body clearly telling me you're in danger here. And I think, why is it still there? I've changed the beliefs. Why am I still feeling like this? And I then had a personal tragedy with the death of my daughter. This was in 2014. And what I found was, going through that, all the tools that I had really, and they weren't helping at all. They weren't getting to this place where I'd got to with that trauma. And what I started to do was look at what was going on beneath the beliefs, beneath it, to like a level of, I describe it like a circuit. If you can imagine energy flowing round, like an electrical circuit. And if the energy is flowing away from us, then we are going to feel vulnerable. We're going to feel that we're in danger. Our subconscious will go into a fight or flight, anxiety will go up, confidence will go down, we'll be on the defensive, we won't be able to put ourselves forward because we're going to feel that we're under attack. And this literally us losing our power, not just in a belief, but in the power being drained from us, was in fact the key. It was the key. And I realized is that when women go into these situations where all the messages are telling us we're not meant to be here, we in fact lose our power energetically, and we flip into a fight or flight. And then I realized, I thought, oh my goodness, I just need to work out how to change this energy balance. And one day I just did it. I reached out, I sort of grabbed my power and I just pulled it back. And I just felt so different. I mean, I still have this smile when I think about it, because at the time my health must have been about, I don't know, 49, 50 or so. And it was the first time ever in my life I'd actually felt confident, relaxed, being me in that situation. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is it. This is what's been missing. We've been going into these situations thinking we're empowered, showing up with our qualifications and our motivation, all the rest of it. But underneath, we're having the energy has been drained out of us. So how can we really be powerful when our system is running on empty? So that was the start of the pull back your power, which is the key technique, which is also the name of my book, Pull Back Your Power. And from that, everything for my work really began to mushroom, because once you understand that you just got to change that power dynamic, I worked out how we can stop ourselves losing that energy in particular situations, how we can reprogram it in a relationship or in a group dynamic, which is very much an Achilles heel situation for many women when you're in a minority and they're trying to speak up. And it was all about learning how to change this power flow, and we can do that using our minds. You don't need a special gift, you just need to understand what's happening and how to change it. And here's the icing on the cake, is when you've pulled in your power and taught your system to hold it and be resilient, even when you're in a stressful situation, all the limiting beliefs, they evaporate, they just go. So I'd done years of belief work, and then I started working with people with my new power techniques, and you know what, they didn't need all that belief work. It was simply the world had been draining their power on that very foundational level. So,
and you hear this, don't you? You hear the words, stop giving your power away, take back your power, reclaim your power. And of course, all these are great, juicy marketing headlines, and we love it because we want our power back. If you feel in any way disempowered, it sounds great to have it back. But it's really understanding, isn't it, what that is about? And it's all about the energy, is what I'm hearing you say, the energy of who we are, and actually leaning into our own strengths. And I think just keeping the descriptions of these things and what we can do as women, it's really important, keeping them simple, because we all have that skill. Sometimes things are made to feel so glamorized and so, you thought, oh my goodness, will I ever be able to get to that stage and elevate myself as such a goddess? But in fact, it's just about working with yourself. And like you say, understanding the balance in our energies, because there are times when we do need to go forward and use our more masculine energy and take action. And there are other times when we just can still say what we need to say without getting all the shoulder pads out or thinking we're back in the 80s, or that we've got to, really tackle every man that comes our way, because that's not necessary.
Well, that's it. You see, that is going into a fight, and we don't want to be fight or flight. And this is the thing that's just so key to understand. If in a situation you are feeling stressed or anxious, or you're not feeling good enough, or you're feeling under attack, that I can guarantee that your power has been drained at that time. And when you learn to literally bring it back, and I'm talking about an energetic flow, not a belief, an energetic flow, when you've brought that back and you've stopped that from being literally sucked by people around you, same situation, you feel different. You feel relaxed. Whatever you're getting from the status quo, it becomes water off the duck's back. And I've worked with people who've started off being unable to do a live or get out online at all because the anxiety around it is so big. They've learned to pull back their power and reprogram those situations, and then they just fly. They're just completely different, feeling different.
And that's the thing. It's key what you said there, I think, as well. When you said, program the situations, like everything that's happened has happened, and it's just been a situation, isn't it, that happened? And it's always about how we feel about it, and so we're being led. Say for instance, how it sounded to me, well, like you were feeling terrible when that would happen in the boardroom. When that happened, you were feeling awful, and we respond to our feelings, and then we make it mean things like, well, that must mean that I'm not able to do this, but I know I am because I've done all the stuff, so why am I feeling like this? And I'm sure that it's something that a lot of women get caught in. And of course, ultimately, if we don't get the answers and we don't get the guidance, we don't find pathways, we will make it mean something, and that won't tend to be positive. And so therefore, I won't do this. I'm not meant to be in business. It's not for me. I'm not that type. I teach women how to sell and have those kind of conversations that are super deep and important, that will help people to make decisions and empower them. They're terrified of them because that has got a lot of perceived, and to have a lot of masculine energy in it, which actually it doesn't. It's a real balance again. So, I love this, and I think it's really important. And listen, the world is trying, okay? And like they say, God loves a trier. Like, the world is trying to bring, awareness around gender disparity, to bring awareness to equal opportunities. But even equal opportunities feels a little bit passé sometimes to me now, the language. And, why is it not landing? Is it just the same answer, or is there anything else we can glean from that? Because there's a lot of discussion about the pay gap. There's a lot of discussion about, I'm quite interested in that, actually, why that doesn't literally just get changed.
It's because we're not changing what's underneath. We are trying on the surface. You're right, there's a lot people are trying to do, but we always default to the autopilot. So I'll give you an example of this. So you'll still find in, for example, films, movies, that if you have, the authority situation, the boardroom, there'll be all the men, there'll be maybe one woman. And it's because when somebody is just creating something, they will go to the subconscious, which will have, oh yes, there's going to be maybe one woman. This is the man's world, all the men, one woman. They aren't saying, right, I need to make sure that I'm creating the gender balance to change the programming. So I'm going to have 50-50. They will immediately serve up the default. And so what we do is we will make an effort. They'll make an effort to think about this, but then they relax and all the autopilot comes back. And
that's interesting, isn't it?
And until I can say to 100 people, what does a surgeon look like? What does a managing director look like? What does an orchestra conductor look like? And they don't immediately get a man in their mind's eye. That tells us that programming is still wrong. We are fighting against it every time, and the subconscious is so big, and of course it's mirrored to us through every single person, and it's also in everything that we see. So that when people talk about how important it is to have role models, and you can't be what you don't see, they don't understand that it's many layers deeper than just of course you can do it, woman. It's not that at all. It's like you're not seeing it, or you're seeing one woman there and she's being attacked and criticized for her weight or her age the way a man isn't. And as well as that, everything in your subconscious is saying, that is forbidden, I'll be punished, I'm not allowed to do this. And I want to really emphasize here that we don't consciously believe that is there. We have, when I say to somebody, or when I do the energy testing on their using kinesiology, and we've tested, I'll be put to death if I have that job. They are horrified that is in their own subconscious because they don't believe it consciously. But until you flag it up, you have no idea how big it is and how negative it is and how much your subconscious is trying to pull you back.
Yeah, it's so true. True.
Oh my goodness, no wonder I feel so terrified of doing that presentation, or so terrified of getting out online, because my subconscious actually believes I'm going to die if I do this.
Yeah, I mean, it's about getting to the root cause, isn't it? And of course, when you talk about how big that is, obviously the whole world having this programming, then we're like, wow, that's a big job. So all we can ever do is work on ourselves and, you know, get to that root cause and work on those subconscious and conscious strategies to really be able to show up individually and hold that space, I think, and let everybody around hold theirs as they do. Do you know what I mean? Because each person's journey is their own. And so, of course, that's the work that you do with women. And it's really interesting because I'm sure a lot of men in that situation would say, well, I believe in equal opportunities. I'm not sexist. I'm not misogynist. I don't have any problem with that. And it's horrible in the same way for them to think. And it's like that whole unconscious bias thing is very, very, very difficult to address. And I would think it's especially difficult to address for men because there's almost like this guilt that sits with it. But I think it's been difficult for them too.
Absolutely.
As they try and turn the wheel in their own world and to align with all of this, there's a lot of work to be done. And so it's almost like, well, it's always one step at a time, one woman at a time, one belief at a time, one problem at a time.
So when you understand that it's beyond belief and it's this power flow, energy flow, then two things really. If you're a woman in that situation and you learn to stop the power drain, your power immediately is magnified. You immediately give out a completely different subtle message. And what I've found again and again is that people begin to treat you in a different way. You're not being undermined by this huge internal conflict telling you that you're not good enough and you shouldn't be there. And you're giving out a different message, people giving you a different response, which is fantastic. But also, I also can show men how they can actively change that energy flow to support women. So maybe you are a man who really wants to help the females in your company. And I've heard this again so many times, man saying, well, I'd love the women to be more confident and put themselves forward, but I don't know how to help them. I can show them how to help them because I can show them how to literally push the power back to them, because the default will just flow away from the women. That's the way the world is. That's the energy flow of the world. You can teach men to reverse that and literally send it back to the women so that they hold their power immediately, like literally in an instant. They are more confident. They're going to feel much better promoting themselves, their work, giving their ideas, and their energy that they project will be different. So it's a two-way street. It's a two-way street. And it's that's the way that we can all be free of that subconscious operating system that's just undermining people all the time.
Absolutely. And I think anyone that's got a desire to do that will have experienced one at least of those feelings that you did in situations like that. And I like the balanced approach. I'm really passionate about that balanced approach. Let's all do this work, but I will do my own work on it. And like you say, that energy, when someone shows up differently, even in just life, we'd say, oh, you seem a bit different. What is that about you? And of course, we're all energy. So we're reading each other's energy and messages and communications all the time. And so, it all's all very subliminal, but also quite simple. Once you get to understand, it's like, okay, so I get it. What can I do? So is your book, and talk about that just for a minute as we wrap up, is your book for men and women?
Well, it was specifically for women, but I've actually had a lot of men read it. And
great. Yeah.
And what they've said is basically, oh my goodness, I had no idea that this was going on. I had no idea. In fact, the first two people to read it were in fact men. And they both said, you've got to write a book for men, which is what I'm doing now.
Yes.
But what my book does, it shows exactly what's going on under the surface, all of these layers of things that the men have no idea are undermining women. So it's not about what is our policy. It's about, how does it actually feel? How does it feel if a woman goes into this situation and there are like 8 men and just 1 woman? How does that actually feel? And what is the effect? And what's the effect of these, the fact that this male benchmark, the world was created by men for men. There's no judgment, it's history, it's what you've inherited. But so women have simply had to fit into what was there. And the way I describe this is my favorite analogy is to think about fish. So the world outside the home, if you like, is like the sea, and the men are the saltwater fish. So it's their environment. It was made for them. It fits them beautifully. So the women are like the freshwater fish in the rivers. They were kept out of it for, as you know, centuries, millennia. Then over just the course of very few years, 100 years, it goes from being completely closed off to suddenly it's opened up. Women are allowed into the promised land. We can now officially have any career that we want, do anything, be anything, have anything. But we didn't evolve for salt water. We evolved freshwater. So what happens, can't breathe. I'm being crushed. Either I have to change myself into a saltwater fish, or I'm going to die. I can't fit in. So that's where this huge conflict comes in. And did the saltwater fish say, oh, let's change the salt content, bring it down a bit so it's like much more comfortable for the freshwater fish? No, it just said, this is how it is, fit in. And this is what people don't realize is, our world is so male default just because it's how it evolved. Like if you think about, say, Parliament, think about our political system, it's so male default, it's so confrontational, antagonistic, two sides, head on. And the way I say, if people say, no, the world is neutral, there's no male default, I'll say, right, okay, think about political system. Would it be the same if women had developed it, not men? And they say, well, no, it wouldn't. It would be completely different. So, right, there you go. This is the male default. And we are having to fit into that in every single career that's out there, which means we are at the moment not free to simply be ourselves, express ourselves, be aligned with our true female power. We are having to change to fit into this. So it's that understanding of that male default that we've inherited and how that actually undermines women on many, many, many levels. And that was one of the main things that flagged up from my book, that men thought, my goodness, I'd never thought about it in those terms. I'd never understood why it is so negative to women. I didn't think it mattered. I didn't think it was a real thing. Because
they also have grown up with that programming in that same way, and so it's about raising the awareness, and that's it's a great metaphor, because it makes people go, I see it now. I see it now, because we're also subjective. We look from our own position and we're like, well, I don't feel like that, and I don't see that, and I maybe I don't even get that, or I don't even believe that it exists. But when you can look at something from another perspective, and use the metaphor you just did, I think that's super, super powerful. And of course, let's not forget, and I think it's really important not to forget, you talk about that 100 years, okay, that was absolute game changer for women. And so that's a huge evolution that's come our way. And we're just still working it. We're just still learning. We're still turning the keys. And of course, in years ahead, when we are not here anymore, we're leaving this kind of work as legacy. And so to move that over the next 100 years, we can't do it all overnight, but sometimes it may feel like it's not happening. But I know that it is, and I like to believe that it is. And I personally want to reassure people that it is, because change can be so incremental like that, environments and beliefs. Yeah, so totally. that's powerful, isn't it?
The way to think about it is this. So, women, our kind of age, we are the ones who are the first ever in history to have true opportunity, really, to have the educations that we want. Me and my mother didn't. My grandmother, my mom was a kitchen maid. This is in the space of 2 generations. You've gone from a kitchen maid in a big house to a Cambridge PhD scientist. All the subtle things simply cannot have had the time to catch up. It just hasn't. So we, women now, we are the ones who've had the opportunity. So we've got a long, long way, but we're so not supported by the programming. So the next generation, it will have shifted more. And so we're the ones doing the hard work, because
we're doing the legwork, ladies and gentlemen.
And because we've pushed away from that old programming, we are feeling the really detrimental effects of that stretch, that inner conflict that I was talking about, because we've got the old programming, but we're living the new life.
And there's plenty as well that have gone beyond the stretch, and I think that's really important to highlight as well, is there's, you know, successes and the rising of, you know, females in their business and the wealth that they can create and the power that they're holding is also, you know, something you never ever would have found before. So when you look at it like that and you kind of zoom out and look at the picture, it's like there's been such a great change, and I think it's important for us to celebrate that too.
Oh, totally.
Whilst we keep turning the cogs, because it can feel difficult, can't it?
Right, it's the thing that I really want to emphasize. Every woman has got this old programming, every woman, every man, and yet we have still managed to achieve fantastic things.
This is it. Yes.
But we're still being undermined at the same time. So when you actually free yourself from that, just think how much more you can achieve, or how much more with the well-being, without the stress, without the forcing yourself, and then we can go even further.
I think we are in the paradigm where we're learning to hold both of those things together. So also becoming empowered and doing this kind of work that you're describing, and then also realizing, yeah, I was undermined there, and that did happen, and I did feel like that, but also I'm empowered and I'm growing. And it's learning, isn't it, to exist in that duality a little bit there, and develop that intelligence to go forward. Yeah.
What I actually teach, one of the ways in is this: the more we feel stressed or anxious, or the less confidence we have, the more imposter syndrome we have, that is in fact the evidence of how far we've come. It's the evidence of what we've achieved, because that is the measure of how far we've pulled away from those old benchmarks. So yes, so the
uncomfortability.
Yeah, good word. So the feeling that we might have interpreted as I'm not good enough, in fact, is the proof of our success.
Yeah. And that's wonderful. And I'm sure that every single woman that's ever felt like she might be suffering from imposter syndrome, as we reference it, will be very pleased to hear that, and hear that very powerful reframe to wrap up on, is take that as a good indicator. Like this is a power tool almost, you know. How can I work with it? And I love that. And you know, as we went back to the beginning of the podcast and we wanted to cover so many things, I think what's lovely here is that we've really laid out the landscape here, and through your, you know, what you've shared with us, Anne, is a really great positioning, so that I think anyone who's listening would hopefully find some nuggets in there and say, I certainly never thought of it like that, or it will have raised some awareness. And this is what we're doing as coaches. This is fundamentally what we're doing in our roles, is raising the awareness, because we can only change what we are aware of. And so thank you for bringing all of that to the table today, and sharing so much of your story and your, you know, your personal tragedies and successes within the center of all of that. So yeah, we hear you, we celebrate you, Anne. Thank you so much for your work. Thank you for being a wonderful guest. Where can people find your book? Oh, is that a silly question?
You can get my book on Amazon. I also have an Audible version, so that's lovely easy to find.
Okay, we'll put all of those in the notes for anyone that's interested, and also where you can get in touch with Anne. And where do you like to be connected with Anne? Where's your ground?
Well, my website is feminineconfidence.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Dr. Anne Whitehouse.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And I hope that everyone's enjoyed listening to this. And if you haven't already, if you're not already on your phones, go and connect with Anne and read a little bit more about it. But most of all, think about, what did this bring up for you? And go and work on that, because I think that's really the next step for everybody. So thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. And thanks for your time.
Thank you.